You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast
Mike. Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. Good morning, everybody. This is Downeast Mike. I think I'm a little bit subdued this morning. I think I'm subdued, but maybe I'm not. Maybe this is full on Downeast Mike, and I just don't realize what I've become in this modern era. I hope you're all doing well. Do you hear that little mic pop there when I move the microphone? That condenser microphone is wicked sensitive. Back in the day when my uncle used to record visitors, he just had an electric microphone, and he'd have the reel-to-reel tape deck going in the background, and he'd be recording you from the moment you came in the door, and you'd hear Aunt Kathy, she'd be yelling out, "Who's there? The boys there? Where's Mom? Oh, she tisn't there." And they would just record everything when you came in, and later you'd have your lappa. It would be like sardines and crackers and stuff. It was a real old down east feast. And I hope you've got a big Christmas feast coming up your way. It's that time of year where you have Christmas feasts and have people come over and visit, right? It's the holiday season. Some people even still say Merry Christmas. But not everybody, right? This is Downeast Mike episode number 70, news and commentary for December 23rd, 2022. I got to look at the clock, but yeah, it's Friday. And our motto here is, some of this is whimsy, some of it is true, and the interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. It's Friday, as we noted. Some of our headlines in our upcoming podcast today, it was minus 30 Fahrenheit in Houlton, Maine in 1980. We took a little bit of license here because it was actually the 22nd of December 1980, but it was minus 30, so we got to look at that story because it is quite interesting. Ads in movies from 1980, some other little stories from 1980. Not a lot going on. It's a kind of a quiet news cycle. The Pukwudgies from 1877. Not exactly, but again, that's some of that whimsy we're throwing in there. And then further down along the trail of silliness, a sea serpent in Maine waters in 1886. And we'll give you Downeast Mike's thoughts on that sea serpent too, and that's coming up in the podcast. Also, Frank Nord threw another song our way. He's really grouchy lately. We're glad we don't have him on the podcast to deal with. He goes on and on and on. He's got all these problems and he works too hard. All right, let's look at international headlines as we always do to see what's going on in the world. As you're just getting up today on Friday, December 23rd, the House January 6th committee has released their final report detailing Trump's coup attempt. For the first known time in public, Putin calls fighting in the Ukraine a war. Always need to have a few wars going on around the world. The Midwest is colder than Mars, as more than 2,500 flights are canceled already. Embarrassing. Trump was ashamed of losing to Biden, according to the January 6th transcript. Missing infant was found alive after authorities arrest woman accused of kidnapping twin babies. I don't know where that was. Anything else here? Airline scrap 4,400 U.S. flights as winter storm disrupts holiday travel. Mississippi police fatally shoot woman holding Walmart worker hostage. And China's stretched health system braces for peak in COVID infections. Furious Biden dropped F-bombs over the border crisis. And Governor Ducey in Arizona agrees to dismantle the makeshift border wall. I think that's all the international headlines we can take. Let's see if there's any Maine headlines of note. Maine athletes are scoring new opportunities through name, image, and likeness deals. Can you name a Maine athlete that you recognize and associate with a product? I really can't. Maybe there's somebody coming, though, from Nike or... let's see, anything else here? Maine reports first flu-related death of child this winter. Okay. We've already seen that one. Powerful storm brings high winds, flooding, and outage concerns to Maine. How Maine lobstermen turned a slap in the face from the White House into a policy victory. And that's about it for local headlines. Oh, while the storm that's supposed to hit will have gusts up to 70 miles per hour. I don't know if we'll feel those or not. Half the time they get that wrong, but we'll see. All right, so let's get right to our podcast. That's enough of that. We have our word of the day, sagacious, S-A-G-A-C-I-O-U-S, is an adjective of keen and far-sighted penetration and judgment, discerning, caused by or indicating acute discernment. Sagacious. You might expect the root of sagacious to be sage, which as an adjective means wise, or as a noun, a wise person. Despite similarities of spelling, sound, and sense, the two words are not closely related. Sagacious comes from sagere, a Latin verb meaning to perceive keenly. Entomologists believe that sage comes from a different Latin verb, sapere, which means to taste, to have good taste, or to be wise. I don't know why we picked sagacious as a word. It first entered the English language around the beginning of the 17th century. It referred to perceptiveness of sight, taste, and especially smell. And one of the first authors to use the word, Edward Topsell, wrote in 1607 of bees searching for something with a most sagacious smelling sense. Sagacious has largely lost the sense of being keen in sensory perception and now almost exclusively means of keen judgment and discerning. Well, I'll have to be sagacious today. Discerning, prudent, wise, insightful, sage, perceptive, and sapient, yeah. All right, let's go back to December 23rd, 1980, and some of the notes, this day in history. There are only 8 days left in the year. Think about that for a moment. On December 23rd in 1783, George Washington resigned as U.S. Army Commander-in-Chief, and he retired to his home at Mount Vernon. Now, did he go home and make wine, or was that Jefferson? In 1788, Maryland voted to cede a 10-mile square area for the seat of the national government. This became the District of Columbia. And when you look at that, 10 miles square, they don't really deserve to be a state, do they? American forces on Wake Island surrendered to the Japanese during World War II, 1941 this day. Also, 1972, December 23rd, an earthquake struck Nicaragua and was reported to have killed up to 10,000 people. What a big earthquake that must have been. And 5 years ago, well, that would have been 1975, CIA agent Richard Welch was killed by gunmen outside his residence in Athens, Greece. That's about it for the associated days. It was minus 30 in Houlton on December 22nd, 1980. It would, at that time, of course, it made Houlton the coldest area in the nation. It was also the coldest temperature recorded in Maine for the year of 1980. A reading of minus 32 was recorded in Fort Kent at the sewage treatment plant, but the official the reading there came from Caribou. The all-time record low of minus 41 for Aroostook County was set in 1955. But it was on February 1st, not in December. Previous low for December 22nd was minus 18. In Bangor, it was minus 23. Isn't that something? Communities in central Aroostook resembled smog-filled cities as smoke puffed from chimneys at homes and businesses Monday morning. Exhaust from vehicles hung like fog in the downtown areas due to the cold air, making visibility difficult at times. Why would you want to see anything anyway? The division office of the Maine DOT in Presque Isle said the cold weather is partly responsible for the broken pavement on US 1. The office said, most state roads are bare and dry with a few patches of ice, but city streets are worse than country areas. The reason is, the office said, that salt and sand are not given the time to penetrate because of the heavier city traffic. It's also too cold for the salt to stick on, a DOT official said. Area hospitals reported only a few cases of frostbite. Dr. David F. Scullion, emergency physician at A.R. Gould Memorial Hospital in Presque Isle, said there were 3 frostbite patients on Monday. 3 victims is not bad for a population of 12,000, he said. I'm sure there are probably other cases we haven't seen. He said the public should stay out of the cold and realize that exposed parts are susceptible to frostbite. That is some great advice. Here's another story we found from 1980. Baby girls and boys use brains differently. They use opposite sides of the brain when listening to fairy tales or music, scientists have found. The finding should fuel the controversy over whether behavioral differences between the sexes are learned or innate. The research was led by Dr. David Schuchard, a psychophysiologist at the National Jewish Hospital National Asthma Center in Denver. He said brainwave tests show that infant girls respond to fairy tales and music with mental activity in the left half of the brain, while infant boys tend to respond with the right half. The brain differences found in the 3-month-old infants apparently disappear as the brain matures, because no such differences are found in adults. Both adult men and women usually use the left hemisphere of the brain for language skills and analytical thinking, while using the right hemisphere for spatial relations and music. I don't know what that means when applied to me. The brainwave tests were conducted while a baby was being fed in the arms of its mother, who was seated in an easy chair. I wonder what the results would be if you were seated in an uneasy chair. Fairy tales and musical passages were played to the baby through lightweight headphones, and the brain's responses were picked up by the sensors taped to the head and displayed on graph paper in another room. This is starting to sound really spooky. Schuchard straddles the controversy between scientists who feel behavioral differences are biological and those who feel the differences result from upbringing and other social forces. Some researchers believe women think and act differently from men because they are biologically different. These scientists contend that women should not be forced to try to match men in math and physics, for instance, because they innately don't excel in those subjects. Other psychologists and sociologists argue that differences in intellectual skills and behavior are due to upbringing, education, and social conditioning. Girls are encouraged not to be good at mathematical tasks because math is considered a masculine subject. The same arguments are made in reverse on the subject of language skills, an area in which girls are thought to excel. It could be that there are minimal differences between boys and girls at birth that are reinforced by their environment, Schuchard says. Researchers say male babies are handled more and female babies are talked to more, but his tests may indicate that genetic factors may play a much larger role than assumed in cognitive interests. A study from 1980 from Denver. Well, if you went out and about to see a movie on this day in 1980 in Bangor, you could have gone and seen Flash Gordon with music by Queen. Flash, I remember that one. There's some other movie here, The Formula. I don't remember that. Clint Eastwood was playing at the Brewer Cinema Center, 6:45 and 9 p.m. showings. Clint Eastwood, Any Which Way You Can, rated PG. He'll knock you out. Change of Seasons with Shirley MacLaine, Bo Derek, and Anthony Hopkins. Chevy Chase, Goldie Hawn in Neil Simon's Seems Like Old Times. That was a stretch. Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor, Stir Crazy. I think they used illicit substances on that one. Let's go all the way back to 1885. That is a good year to look at some stories. The Green Boughs of Christmas. It was a quaint, druidic custom to deck the houses with evergreens in December, so that, as the old chronicle has it, the sylvan spirits might repair to them and remain unnipped with frost and cold winds until a milder season had renewed the foliage of their darling abodes. That's a complicated way of saying they'd go hide in the evergreens. The Indian legend of the Vanishers becomes transformed in the verse of the Christian seer into the sweetest of childlike dreams. It is this illusory element that is Christmas. These flitting shapes that baffle the search of maturer years are the bleak reminders of the days of childhood. There are even dim forebodings in the minds of children themselves that they are losing their grasp upon the realm of fancy. 2 little girls were walking in one of our streets yesterday, and one was overheard to say to the other, "I don't care if I am 9 years old. I ain't old enough not to be my father's baby." The 9-year-old was, in the journey of life, some ways ahead of that other little one who, for the first time, having the stars pointed out to her, requested the next day to have 2 little stars with sugar on them for breakfast. So it is that Christmas fancies need sugar coating, and it must be the real, truly honest sugar. The bright lights and the glistening tinsel transfigure the simplest gifts upon the tree. The Yule season used in Elden times, they wrote, to last from Christmas Eve to Twelfth Night. For nearly a fortnight, it was more or less a holiday upon the Christian world. It is frequently noted fact that New England has changed her sentiments regarding Christmas. This generation can hardly conceive of the time when Massachusetts colony forbade the observance of the day by statute. Yet the green boughs of Yuletide have not taught us their last lesson. And more to come. It is inexplicable why Americans cannot learn to be more joyous. There is wisdom in carefully planned waste of time. An hour's exercise once a day is vastly better for the system than a solid half day once a week. The spirit of Christmas needs to extend through the whole Yule season and to leap the boundary of Twelfth Night. Why invite the sylvan fairies for only one night in the year? Why drive them forth from the family hearthstone until the budding leaves and the rippling brooks again offer their glad welcome? It is poor policy to try to make up for weeks or months of barrenness with the intense pleasures of a single evening. There is dawning a healthful reaction against condensed beef and condensed classics. Prolong the Yule tide and don't throw away the evergreens until the summer has come when all will be glad in spite of itself. And that was a lot to unpack there. But anyway, we looked into the Vanishers, the Indian legend, and we found they're called Pukwudgies. Pukwudgies. So they can appear and disappear at will. They shapeshift, of which the most common form is a creature that looks like a porcupine from the back and a half troll, half human from the front, and walks upright. Now, you can see these in downtown Portland on any given day. They lure people to their deaths, use magic, launch poison arrows, and create fire. Native Americans believe that Pukwudgies were once friendly to humans, but then turned against them and are best left alone. I should say so. According to lore, a person who annoyed a Pukwudgie would be subject to nasty tricks by it, or subject to being followed by the Pukwudgie, who would cause trouble for them. They're known to kidnap people, push them off cliffs, attack their victims with short knives and spears, and to use sand to blind their victims. Pukwudgies are said to be the enemies of culture heroes Mashop and Granny Squannet. One story from Wampanoag folklore explains that they began causing mischief and tormenting the natives out of jealousy of the devotion and affection the natives had for Mashop, who eventually exiled them to different parts of North America. like central Maine. The Pukwudgies have since been hostile to humans and took revenge by killing Mashop's 5 sons. Some variations even suggest they killed Mashop himself. So there you know all about Pukwudgies. Look out for them. Short spears and knives and sand. We had a story out of Chicago, kind of a sad story. A discarded lover attempts suicide. Mrs. Lizzie Brown, a young woman, has for some time been annoyed by the persistent attentions of John Oakley, a barber. She tried in various ways to rid herself of him, but without success, and on Saturday she had him arrested on charges of disorderly conduct. The case was continued to Thursday, and Oakley gave bail, and when the lady was leaving the courtroom, she was followed by Oakley, who assaulted her with a razor. He cut her on the elbow and then attempted her throat, but only succeeded in inflicting a long, ugly gash over her right temple. Oakley then cut his own wrist, but he will recover. Okay, I got a longish story here about a Kennebec farmer, but we thought it was cute because it was just so bland. A Kennebec farmer, the Littlefield Farm, and its owner out of Chelsea, special correspondent of the Lewiston Journal. As you pass down the east side of the Kennebec on the road leading from Augusta to Pittston, just before the Hollowell Ferry is reached in the town of Chelsea, and what used to be a part of Hollowell years ago, you'll reach the fine farm of Mr. O.W. Littlefield. Isn't it funny? His name's Littlefield and he's a farmer, but he's actually got big fields. Mr. Littlefield has occupied this farm for quite a number of years, although he is quite as familiar with plowing the mighty deep as in plowing furrows in Maine soil, having followed the sea for many years. He was in the United States Navy during 3 years in the War of the Rebellion, and he took part in several noted naval engagements, one of which was at Fort Fisher. Some years ago, Mr. Littlefield abandoned a seafaring life, returned to his native town, and bought the farm on the Augusta Road, and he's since devoted his whole life to agricultural pursuits. At the time he purchased this estate, it was in a somewhat run-down condition, but with ready means and an eye to improvements, he immediately, after his purchase, set about improving the premises and bringing the fields to greater fertility. Among the improvements has been the purchase of 30 acres of land adjoining and the building of 100 rods of substantial stone wall. By this latter enterprise, a large area of cultivated land was cleared of stone, by which smooth mown fields are the result. With the improvements of his fields comes an increase in the fodder supply of the farm, which enabled Mr. Littlefield to carry out the true policy of Maine farming of keeping more stock, and by the accumulation of dressing and other fertilizing materials purchased, he's enabled him to steadily bring his farm up to a high state of cultivation. All right, Mr. Littlefield's farm now comprises nearly 100 acres, about 50 acres being under tillage and the remainder in pasturage. This farm at present time is carrying 17 head of horned cattle, 12 of this number being milk cows. The remainder are 2 yokes of oxen and 1 heifer. 1 yoke of these steers are 2 years old, a very nice pair, well matched, high-graded Holsteins. Mr. Littlefield keeps also 2 horses and 1 colt, the latter a yearling, and it's called by good judges one of the finest colts of his age in Kennebec County. Mr. Littlefield, for a number of years, has made the milk business a specialty and at one time run a large milk route in Augusta. At present, he's furnishing 400 gallons of milk a month to the Maine Insane Asylum at Augusta. He feeds large quantities of shorts and meal to his cattle at a cost of some $300 a year. In addition to his neat stock, there are 4 hogs and a flock of 30 fine Plymouth Rock hens at the place. This farm cut 40 tons of hay in 1884, but this year, being a short year, the crop is considerably less. The past season, there were 12 acres in crops on this farm from which they raised 240 bushels of grain, 125 bushels of potatoes, 23 bushels of beans, and 50 bushels of ears of popcorn. What a great story. We'll round it out a little bit more. The farmer's got one of the finest young orchards in the town of Chelsea. There are 300 apple trees, 12 pear trees, and a number of cherry trees. 100 trees were in bearing this past season. And so it goes on. 250 bushels of cattle beets and table beets, turnips, 800 pounds of Hubbard squash, 180 pails of cranberry beans. What a lot of work. There's also a large cider mill in this place. The mill was improved a few years ago. It's a first-class mill in nearly all of its details. There have been 2,300 bushels of apples manufactured into cider at this mill this past fall. When did he rest? Mr. Littlefield's farm. That's a great story. That was in Chelsea. There one little thing here. Mr. Wyman of Litchfield's manufacturing more apples into cider for vinegar than ever before in one season. December 15th, he was running his mill at full capacity with a full crew, having about 3,000 bushels of apples on hand to manufacture. He's just finished making a vinegar tank like the one made a few years ago that holds 7,000 gallons each, 14,000 altogether, and made cider and filled with the new tank in 7 working days from the time it was completed, 7,200 gallons. He has made a great amount of cider for customers, some coming 8 miles or so, bringing apples and exchanging them for cider. He allows 4 gallons per bushel, and he charges 1.5 cents per gallon for making. Let's see. Another story out of Bethel. 6 inches of snow, thermometer registering 0, makes business lively at Bethel. And we also had Mr. Lawrence died in South Chesterfield. He was 75. We knew that, didn't we? Oh, yeah, out of Chelsea. Sheriff Hames of Chelsea arrested a tramp a few days ago at Chelsea and took him before Judge Stevens. We know he's tough. Stevens sentenced him to 30 days in the Kennebec jail. He was penniless, and no one could understand any of his language. Mr. William Trask's son, William Jr., is recovering from a slow fever. The school in School District 9 has commenced winter term after a vacation of 2 weeks. Seems like they should be taking more time off. The Knickerbocker Ice Company making preparations to build some new ice houses at a nearby South Chelsea. Mrs. Norcross is visiting Mr. L for Devonport, and she's been quite ill with an abscess on the neck. Thought you ought to know that. Also, Mr. Edgar Littlefield of Chelsea Heights, he's building a new hen house. Oh, and this is what we wanted to tell you. The Kennebec at this place has been frozen over for some time, so that there is crossing for foot passengers, and there will be for teams as soon as the bridge is down at the Hollowell Landing. Now, the Kennebec today, certainly not anywhere near frozen over if there's ice on at all. In fact, they're dredging out there. Or they're putting some utility lines across right in Chelsea there, going over to Augusta. Sea serpent time. Let's get to our main story here about the sea serpent. The real sea serpent, the true and only one, and this is from 1886, has made his appearance for the first time this summer at Rockport Breakwater, Rockport, Maine. It's no imaginary sea serpent existing in the fertile mind of an enthusiastic newspaperman or concocted for the benefit of any particular watering place. This serpent is vouched for by men of undoubted veracity. Charles Russell, Esquire of Gloucester, Summer York, Albert Tarr, he's a teller at the Rockport National Bank. They've been camping out at what is known as Galley Point. Saturday evening, Mr. Tarr sat with a glass in his hand and saw a large body not far from shore. It was a monster. The attention of the rest of the party was called to the large body. Every one of the party were unbelievers in the sea serpent. Gracefully, a serpent ship coiled towards shore, and before turning away from the rocky coast, had ventured within 200 yards of the campers. So far as could be judged, the marine monster was 100 feet or over in length and as large as a barrel. The head was seen upright in the water. When under the water, the body floated on top of the waves. Major Kent, a summer visitor, saw the object, but he was further away from the campers and did not get a good look. He thought it was a large fish with a long net in tow. Let that be a clue. Mr. Russell said to the correspondent he would not believe it if he had not seen it with his own eyes. He expressed it as a sight the like of which he never saw. If there ever was a sea serpent, that certainly was one. In Sumner, York, he was a skeptic, but now he's a firm believer. He's seen it and found no argument will change his belief. He saw the sea serpent with his own eyes. It gracefully swam within 100 yards and coming around the point made a great sweep and headed toward the breakwater. Sounds a little bit fishy, but we've got a follow-up story here. From 1897, several citizens of Eastport get a view of the monster. Unluckily, however, no one had a camera at hand, and the snake ship passed on into the Bay of Fundy unmolested by any. From Eastport, Maine, October 29th, special, 1897. For the third time this year, the sea serpent has been seen in neighboring waters by Canadian island boatmen, but each time they were too far away to get a shot at the monster, because that's the first thing you want to do is shoot it. Recently, Captain Grant Dakin, I used to know the Dakins, a resident of Grand Manan Island and well known about Quoddy, was sailing near the White Horse Rock down the bay when he beheld in the distance and coming down past Quoddy Bay a strange-looking object. It made directly for his small schooner, and when close, the head and neck of a large serpent could be plainly seen. He says the sight was one he'll never forget, and from the parts exposed above water, he estimates the length of the serpent as between 40 and 50 feet. But the reptile did not strike the boat, and passing by went out into the Bay of Fundy. Captain Lawrence Sinclair of the small schooner Britannia, also of Grand Manan, is reported to have seen the sea serpent before, and it was early in the spring when the monster was observed in the bay by numbers of prominent Eastport citizens who were not mistaken, except that each had a special length of the fish when it passed. It cannot be denied that an unusually large object has been seen at times swimming in and near Passamaquoddy Bay, and occasionally a report is heard of its visits, but such conflicting stories are told by the observers that it's difficult to get a description, and the mysterious sea serpent refuses to be interviewed. A little bit of sarcasm there. Of course, the common thought is this is an oar fish. I think they've even got some washed ashore in the weirs in the Bay of Fundy, and determined it's an oar fish, and that's what it would look like from shore swimming along. All right, here's our all-important weather forecast for today. Rain with thunderstorms possible after 1 p.m. Some of the storms could produce heavy rain with a high near 51. Yay, turn the furnace off. Windy with an east wind 20 to 30 miles per hour with gusts as high as 55 miles per hour. Chance of precipitation is 100%. So why is it a chance? It's 100%. New rainfall amounts between 1 and 2 inches possible. So windy in the overnight. For Saturday, mostly sunny with a high near 23. Southwest wind 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusts as high as 25. And Christmas Day, mostly sunny with a high near 25. Well, that's our Downeast Mike podcast for today, Friday, December 23rd. And until next time, this is Downeast Mike wishing you and your loved ones a day that is full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see ya.
Went to the river, but the river was dry. Couldn't fill my bucket, so I didn't even try. I'm holding my head, oh, I don't feel a thing. Gonna bury my troubles, dig them up in the spring. Oh, I wish I could go straight on down to the Gulf of Mexico. Instead, I'm stuck up here in the cold, and the hits keep a-coming, the hits keep a-coming, the hits keep a-coming anyway. Took my last $5 to buy something fun. Gonna light it in New Zealand just to watch 'em run. Gonna sleep on a bench under the stars, dreaming of the palms and big plush cars. Oh, I wish I could go straight on down to the Gulf of Mexico. Instead, I'm stuck up here in the cold, and the hits keep a-coming, the hits keep a-coming, the hits keep a-coming anyway. Across that security jerk. Last week he took my bedroll and now I know hurt, but I let all the air out of his blue Prius tires. If we meet again, it's gonna be fire. Oh, I wish I could go